Okay, I am seeing us on YouTube. I will wait 1 more minute to call it to order. Okay, I think I'm good. I think we're good. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is a Wednesday, September 9th, 2020 virtual special town council meeting of the Scarborough, Maine Town Council. First item is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty
and justice.
and justice for all.
Tody, you want to do roll call, please?
Councillor Clucci?
Here.
Councillor Hayes?
Here.
Councillor Gleisteen?
Here.
Councillor Katerina?
Here.
Councillor Johnson?
Here.
Councillor Hamel?
Here.
And Chairman Johnson.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a special meeting, so there are no public comments, but I am going to just, without objection, I'll break protocol and see if there's any public comments. Item number 4, or a item before our business. Is there any members in the public that would like to make general public comments? And I don't have any in my email, so I will proceed. Order number 20064, second reading regarding the authorization of a credit enhancement agreement for the Scarborough Downtown Omnibus Municipal Development and Tax Increment Financing District, Jocelyn Place Affordable Housing, and the authorization and delegation to the town manager to execute such agreement in substantially the form as presented to the town council. Tom, you want to give us the background?
Certainly. I think this matter has been fairly sufficiently workshopped. There's been at least 2 to my recollection, if not 3. Most recently, you held a public hearing last meeting. Our attorney, before the public hearing was convened, our attorney brought you back to a couple of points based on input from the developer. And the council actually made amendments to the credit enhancement agreement prior to the public hearing. So what is before you this evening reflects all amendments that have been offered and that have passed throughout this approval process. And this matter sits before you in second and final reading.
Thank you. Before I ask for a motion, is there anybody in the public that would like to speak to this? Seeing none, can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
And do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you. Discussion? Councilor Katerina?
Yes, again, I'm fully in support of moving this forward. I know it's no surprise to anybody that I think that a program like this, a facility like this, is very important to the town of Scarborough. I do thank those councilors who asked there be an additional piece put in that makes sure they prioritize, apologize, stumbling over that, citizens of the town of Scarborough, but I'm fully in support of this.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councilor Hayes?
Yeah, I think it was still an open-ended question about that wasn't answered in the workshop in the prior meeting. Is there a difference in liability whether this is sponsored by the Board of Education in school under their auspices or the municipal, as far as what if there's incidents, what if there's breakouts, who is liable? I understand it falls to our general liability insurance, but I'm not sure we ever got an specific answer about, are there greater liability protections if it's under the school auspices rather than the municipal?
Peter, I think you are referring to order number 20076. We're currently on the Jocelyn Place, so. we'll reserve.
Oh, I apologize. Yeah.
No,
sorry.
no problem. Any others on the Jocelyn place? Councilor Hamel?
Yes, I wanted to thank everybody for the efforts that were put forward, in the first place to kind of question and to really scrutinize the opportunity to make sure that it was going to have the proper benefits, but also was going to be an appropriate investment by the town. And I don't know the number, but there were dozens of questions that were answered in rapid fire. So I want to thank the town staff and others for their work on those. And I think ultimately it's led us to a good place, and I'm in support of this.
Thanks, Don. Anybody else? Councilor Clucci?
Yeah, I think the council definitely did its due diligence on this one, especially Mr. Hamel and Councilor Weinstein. I think it's positive for the town. I think it's going to add some economic development to that area. It provides much, well-documented much housing for seniors, and it's going to be a high-quality project. So I fully support it. I'm glad that it was brought forward.
Thank you. Any others? Councilor Gleisteen and then Councilor Hayes?
But yeah, it's definitely going to be a high quality project. So I think that it speaks very well of the folks that are involved and what they will build. And from that standpoint, it's definitely going to be a plus for folks in Scarborough. We'll have to see how it turns out. But the director of the South Portland Housing Authority, Mike, said he felt pretty sure this would be all Scarborough residents. So I found that statement pretty interesting, and we'll see how that comes out. But he felt the demand was there to fill this housing with all Scarborough residents. And I do support this, but I do still have an issue that I'm not happy with it not being an affordable housing TIF. I think Councilor Clucci had pointed out some additional advantages that we would have under that, as well as we wouldn't be setting aside an additional 3% out of the mill rate, against the mill rate for the property tax owners, because I think, while affordable housing is great, I think we have to remember that other people pay for affordable housing. And in this particular case, the financing is very complex. That's the way these things work. So there's investors, there's state money, there's federal money, and that's all great. But there is a piece of opportunity cost, I think, as Councilor Hayes pointed out, for that piece of property based on the property taxes that local property tax holders would have received. And I just think, we need to scrutinize every dollar. We need to have a larger plan around affordable housing in terms of how much we're going to subsidize with tax, because, when everything we subsidize, it does make someone else in the town is paying for it. And perhaps it makes their housing less affordable. So I am in support of this. I think as South Portland Housing Authority, I would encourage anyone to call me if they have questions. I know that name sounds a little bit disconcerting to people, but I think if you understand the whole process and how it works, you'll see that we do have an excellent partner in this area. And as I said, another time, influence factor for me is that the abutters support this. So I think it's a win-win for the town. I'd like to make sure we get an affordable policy TIF policy written, as well as kind of look at this overall in terms of the comp plan as we have it coming up.
Thank you. Councilor Hayes?
Yeah, I think I do respect Councilor Gleisteen's comments about the South Portland Housing Authority. I think have high integrity. They're a great entity. I will not be supporting this tonight. I think mostly it is not about the project. It is more about the process. Last time we had the workshop, there was a majority view that we really should get some outside expertise to overlook any transactions and the details of the deal. We chose not to do that. I am concerned that not only this, but in other transactions we've done, these are very complex deals, as Councillor Weinstein has pointed out. They extend decades. A minor change suggested by our attorney ended up saving property owners about $1 million by just changing some terms. That's really concerning to me. And I think, this is sort of a common theme that I've had. Certainly, we just learned recently at Scarborough Downs, similarly, that the whole justification for the Scarborough Downs in the CEA money was that we were going to have light industrial development that was going to generate significant tax revenues that would help subsidize some of the other things. Now it turns out that apartment buildings are considered light industrial. That is a significant detail that we missed. We didn't have the expertise. That's going to end up costing the town hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of this. So I am concerned about the process. I agree with Councillor Gleisteen that I'm not quite sure why we didn't do the analysis to compare it being under the economic TIF versus the affordable housing TIF. I do not agree that we've done our due diligence on this project. And there's an opportunity cost. I mean, the assumption here is we've asserted to our constituents that this is a break-even cost. And we're assuming that lot that this is going to be built on remains vacant in a dirt gravel pit for 30 years. And that's not true. The whole reason we do economic development TIFs is the whole premise was if we did it for Scarborough Downs, that was going to bring commercial real estate and commercial development to our town that would help. The opportunity cost here that we haven't talked about, if this was developed as a commercial property, the tax value, the cost of taxpayers about is $5 million. That's about $90,000 per unit that property owners are paying to subsidize this. We are worried about affordable housing for the greater Portland community. I'm worried about folks in town that have properties that are being at the point where they can no longer afford the property taxes. What I'm concerned about that nobody's talking about, we are facing a $100 million primary school in the next 3 to 5 years. There's going to be a proposal for a $16 million library expansion. That's going to increase taxes about 15 to 20% going down the road. The whole premise was commercial development was going to help pave the way and contribute. If we look what's been happening, we had $1 million in abatements last year from over appreciation of our residential values. We have offered abatements to Walmart. We are now facing some other abatements. You look at what's going to happen to Cabela's. I am concerned that we are the prime commercial real estate that we're relying on to help drive some of the infrastructure costs that we see coming. So I don't think we've done our due diligence. I think there's other opportunities. And so I will not be supporting this evening.
Thank you. Councilor Caterina?
Yeah, I have a question for the manager, if I may, through the chair.
Sure.
Mr. Manager, the apartments at Scarborough Downs, it's my understanding that I think it's the mixed use, or at least the commercial apartments, in other words, 4 units or more apartments, they aren't considered light industrial, correct? They're considered commercial?
Using the terminology from the credit enhancement agreement, they're considered non-residential.
Okay, so there's no distinction there?
They're certainly not considered light industrial, but for purposes of that credit enhancement agreement, they are and very explicitly defined in the CEA as non-residential and therefore counting toward their targets.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to, because I don't want people to think they're light industrial. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any others? Okay, Tody, do you want to call the vote, please?
Yes.
Well, I did have a quick comment because I think only in government can you say that housing is non-residential. So that's the oxymoron of government.
Jean Marie, it's kind of off topic from the order, so Tody, call the vote, please.
Well, no, I need to answer that.
No, you don't. You actually don't. I'm not going to let you. I am moving the question. Tody, please call the vote.
Councillor Clucci?
Yes.
Councillor Hayes?
No.
Counselor Glystein,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. Thank you.
Next item is order number 2071. It's an act to move approval. Actually, before I say this, Tony, there's a little typo on this agenda, so I'm going to try to read this appropriately. I believe there's a copy and paste error. So Tony, is the appropriate way for me to read it the way I think it should be read, or? You're on mute, Tony, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, just read it up to act to move approval on the new request for the following marijuana establishment licenses.
Okay, all right, cool. So I'll cross out everything
Yes.
after. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So, excuse me. Order number 20071 is act to move approval on the new request for the following marijuana establishment licenses. Number 1 is Agricult LLC located at 10 Snow Canning Road for a medical marijuana cultivation facility. And number 2 is High Test Laboratory LLC, DBA is Canna Conversions located at 3 Commercial Road for medical manufacturing facility and for adult use manufacturing facility. And number 3 is Port City Farms LLC located at 3 Commercial Road for medical marijuana cultivation facility and for adult use cultivation facility. And number 4 is Up North Gardens LLC located at 10B Snow Canning Road for medical marijuana cultivation facility. Does Liam want to tee this up, Tom, or do you want to, or it's up to you here? But it's sponsored by Liam, I believe.
I would prefer Liam just because he's really been shepherding these through the process.
Yep.
You could promote him.
Absolutely. Liam, you will be on camera, just as a heads up.
I assume he's presentable.
He's definitely wearing a suit and tie. I can tell you that much.
Good evening. Yeah, so to speak to the subject at hand, there are essentially 6 licenses before the council. This is the first batch of what we expect will be at least 4. Again, as Tom referenced last meeting, there will likely be, I think we have 25 in the queue. Of the 25, 20 of them are medical cultivation facilities. So just speaking to this first batch, each one of these licenses has been thoroughly vetted by staff, including site visits. We've actually met with the applicants individually in a small group to go through any lingering questions staff had. But we have gone on site as an inspection team for this first batch that included the fire inspector, a representative from the police department, our zoning administrator, our commercial code enforcement officer, our electrical specialist code enforcement officer, and myself. So we've actually put eyes on all of these facilities. We've gotten pretty thorough overviews of their operation. We've verified their odor control plans are in place. We've verified their security plans. So it's been a pretty thorough vetting. Obviously this is the first time around, so we're gonna, there's some lessons learned. I expect there'll be some comments brought back to the ordinance committee for some tweaks and revisions. But I think that we feel pretty strongly that everyone's in a pretty good place for them.
Thanks, Liam.
Yep.
Any comments from members of the public before I accept a motion? Okay, none. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, just for the public and my understanding, because I heard the term 25 in the pipeline. Just to clarify, these are growers that already existed in the town of Scarborough before we had the ordinance, correct?
From my sense, Councilor Johnson, the vast majority of them were existing operations. We do have one on the agenda this evening, which is it's technically a new operation. However, they've occupied a space that was they're sort of moving into a space that was previously occupied by a similar operation. So I think the short answer is yes, largely that's true.
Okay, because I just don't want people to think we passed an ordinance, all of a sudden we have 25 growers flying into town, right?
No, that's not. Many of these operations have been in existence for years.
Okay, so this is more legitimizing the enterprises and collecting the correct licensing and having the review by the correct parties.
Yes,
Okay.
it's a regulation piece.
Thank you.
Councilor Katarina?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing as Mr. Johnson, and I just wanted to remind the public that all of these people, in addition to what Mr. Gallagher was talking about regarding the licensing pieces have been through a thorough process with ordinance too. We worked on this for a number of months. So I just wanted to make sure that people were reminded of that.
Thank you. Councilor Clucci?
Yeah, I just had a question. We received an email today from a neighbor of one of the growers complaining of odor that's been happening over the past couple of years. And I'm wondering if through the site visit process, if anybody that was there noticed or picked up on something that might be unacceptable.
I think the short answer is it's tough. One of the, I think you'll notice based on the addresses that two of these applicants are actually in the same facility. That facility, you'll see a theme develop where there's a number of operations in that same facility. They all have odor control measures, but I think one of the challenges will be determining where that odor is originating from. I think it's just the reality of, you're going to see applications from that one site come through in all 4 batches. So I think that it's something that we're going to have to see. We have some performance measures in there and some expectations, and we may soon have to cross that bridge of enforcement if we're continuing to have concerns from abutters and neighbors.
But for these applicants anyways, it wasn't something that you felt worthy of flagging?
It's not something that we could determine based on our site visit, no.
Councilor Gleistein and then Councilor Hayes.
Liam, do you happen to have a total dollar figure on the licenses from this batch?
I certainly could provide that, Councilor. I know that I do have a running tally of anticipated revenue should all of the license applications we've received to date be approved, and I estimate that revenue to be about $40,000. As you'll see from the ordinance, many of the the medical cultivation licenses are not overly it's not an overly large revenue or fee, annual fee, but we do have some other manufacturing licenses which expect to generate a pretty healthy sum.
Right. Yeah. So my comment is, it's tradition or expected if someone's going to vote no that they explain their vote. I don't think it was a big secret that I was not in favor of this. So ethically, I'm still not in favor of it. I do appreciate the amount of work that the town has done, and that especially with this first batch and leading that up, I think sounds like a great job. I know it's here to stay, and I wish the businesses the best. I hope it works out for them. I still don't support this in town. I don't have ill will for anyone doing it, and I look forward to working on issues that may or may not arise from this. I have several thoughts about perhaps how to deal with the odor if there is odor. So hopefully as a council, we can work on issues that arise. But again, I appreciate the due diligence and just wanted to explain why I'd be voting no.
Thank you. Councilor Hayes?
Yeah, just kind of a question. So I understand that the ones that are in front of us tonight are already established businesses that have been here and operating for the most part, I think Liam suggested. Liam, just a question I was just curious about the 25 that are maybe in the pipeline. What sort of criteria can we use to try to, going forward when these come in front of us? I mean, this would be a pretty significant expansion of the activity in our community. Any suggestions for us on how we're going to look at the remaining licenses that you're suggesting are coming our way?
Well, I mean, again, I think to Councilor Johnson's earlier question, I think that the vast majority of these are existing operations and have been for a period of time. And so I think that I think that there's some evidence to suggest that I don't think that people were aware of the level of or the number of cultivation facilities in town. I certainly think that to the degree there are concerns that are presented through this process around the number and volume, I certainly think that it's something that probably would need to go back to ordinance for consideration. But I think that I think staff really is taking this process as a learning opportunity. I mean, I think that we're educating ourselves, on kind of how these operations work. And I think that the real, maybe not challenge, but the task in front of us is making sure that everyone, they're good neighbors, and the concerns that have been identified and voiced from citizens, to the degree those exist, aren't coming to pass. So I think it's more about managing it and seeing how it kind of goes, from my standpoint.
So are you saying that the 25 that you referenced are in the pipeline, are they also all existing sort of entities? I assume they were new.
The vast majority of them, Councilor.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, just if I could, the staff is reviewing these establishments against the standards that were just established through the marijuana licensing ordinance. And so, as has been suggested, as we have some experience, we may want to go in and modify that further. But please do have the comfort that we are holding each of these applications accountable and comparing them to the standards that you've created.
Yeah, and if I could just offer one more comment, I will say that the personal experience working with the applicants that are before you this evening, they've all been exceptionally willing to listen to concerns, be responsive to questions. I think that they're really acting in good faith and trying to do the right thing and adhere to the ordinance and parameters that the council adopted. So I think that for what that's worth.
Thank you. Any others? No. So my final comment, first of all, I think the ordinance committee, you guys did a phenomenal job. I believe it kicked it back, came back. I think a lot of players were involved in town. I will say there is an odor problem in the snow canning area, and it does need to be addressed. I'll just say that as flatly and bluntly and as publicly as possible. We received one email today, and my prediction is we'll receive many others. I personally had my first marijuana conversation about my daughter because as going down Pine Point Road, my daughter and I smell so much marijuana in the air that we then had to discuss marijuana, which is completely fine with me. That's a comfortable conversation for me. But there's an issue down there that needs to be addressed. So I am a yes, and I do not want to impede any businesses, but our work as a council is certainly not done. We need to solve the puzzle of the odor down there. There needs to be a little less marijuana and a little more sea salt back down in that area. So we need to, that's our responsibility. So. Tony, you want to call the vote?
Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Hayes,
Yes.
Counselor Glycine,
No.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes.
and Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is order number 20076. It's an act on the request to initiate offering extended childcare by directing and authorizing the town manager to execute a lease agreement for the property located at 418 Payne Road and to enter a memorandum of understanding with Crosshold Holdings LLC to underwrite this program in substantial, I always trip on this word, substantially the form as presented in town council. Is there any comments from the public? Liam, I'm going to boot you from the meeting. Just let me know if you want to come back. Any comments from the public? I think I can boot him. I'm going to try. If he's gone, I'm sorry. No comments from the public. With that, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second. I'm going to go to Councilor Glycine first because she's requested, I think, first time because she wants to share her screen. And then Peter, I'll go to you after Betsy because I know you had a question, so I don't want to skip over that.
Yeah.
You could do the
Do
question
you have,
first.
do you have sharing privileges?
I'm working on it.
Well, no, if you don't, just let me know. I'll try to give them to you. That's fine.
Yeah, it looks like it. What's always difficult is the window that it's sharing.
Yes,
So
totally
I-
agree.
yeah. Is that sharing?
It is. Yep.
Okay. So I'm not sure, Paul, if you were gonna share some of the information we got from Leanne this evening in terms of the Board of Education's statement to us via in writing. So that probably is a good thing to look at.
Yep. And actually, Betsy, I apologize to Todd and Tom. I didn't let you guys tee this up, so to speak. So I apologize. But
Yeah, I can wait.
yeah, you want to I'll
Yeah.
come to you once they tee it up.
Yeah,
I'll share.
that would make a ton more sense for my.
Yep. Sorry. I was just trying to honor your request. So I
Well,
apologize.
thank you so much. I appreciate it. But
So I'm going to let Tom and Todd take the floor. Then I'll share Leanne's correspondence with us. And then Betsy, you'll be next. I apologize. So. All right, Tom / Todd,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, thank you to the council for being so receptive to understanding the need in our community and being so responsive, including scheduling a special meeting tonight to consider the matter. Time certainly is of the essence with students already in schools. And so not to reiterate, multiple past discussions, but this is in direct response to a unique need that has been presented through and by way of the school board deciding to go through the hybrid approach, whereby half the students are physically in class and the other half are virtual, essentially. It's those days where students have expectations of attending synchronized learning virtually that parents and families are really having difficulty making that happen. And that's the gap we're trying to fill here. We're very pleased that in short order, we've been able to really fine tune all the moving parts here. And so what we present to you this evening are final terms presented in the form of a letter of intent that will be converted to a formal commercial lease document, but the substance will be consistent with what's presented here. Similarly, the memo of understanding regarding the underwriting of any potential loss we may incur with this program, I believe is certainly substantially in the final form. I've had multiple conversations with the other party, and I'm confident putting this draft in front of you this evening. So we are interested in getting the council's final decision so we can make efforts or not, so to speak. But again, very appreciative of your willingness to take this matter on very quickly.
Thanks, Tom. Todd, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Not at this time, Paul. I can field
Okay.
questions when we get to them. So
Thank you.
thank you.
And now I will share, in case you didn't get it, Leanne was kind enough to send us an email. I don't have it in any pretty format, so I apologize. So I will just share her email and I will read it aloud for everybody to hear. It says, this letter is written to express the intent of the Scarborough BOE to support Scarborough Community Services in creating a childcare model to serve some students attending school in our current hybrid remote or contingent fully remote learning model. Director Todd Souza shared information about this new program with the BOE at our September 3rd, 2020 meeting. The program is being created to offer a safe location with adult supervision for students who are attending school remotely so their parents can go to work. Federal funding for community day programming has been released by the governor through the DOE, and our application is being prepared. This will be a competitive grant, so funding for Scarborough is not assured. You can see more information here. The board wishes to express their support for this initiative and outlines here the intent of school administrators to contribute to this effort. 1, the board appreciates the work of community services to create this new childcare opportunity and will publicly support the initiative. 2, school administrators will assist community service in drafting and submitting a DOE grant application with filing claims for reimbursement for the grant if the grant is approved. 3, the facilities director will provide decommissioned furniture from district storage for use for the community services program, tables, chairs valued at $2,500. 4, the facilities director may provide on loan classroom furnishings that are currently in this district storage due to the need to create social distancing in our schools. 5, the district will also include the students in community services program in accessing daily breakfast and lunch for all students, thanks to the recent waiver passed by the USDA and the district's ability to extend our status as a quote summer feeding site through December 31st, 2020. I think I'm on 6. 6, if the community service program is discontinued, the school business manager will give consideration to purchasing any available furnishing from the program, which were purchased and that may be suitable and needed for our use in the school. And finally, if this community services program is discontinued during the school year because schools return to fully in-person learning model, and if the community services program ends the year with a budget deficit due to this change in school conditions, the board will give consideration to allocating financial support to community services for any general fund surplus created through the district's own deployment of COVID-related budget resources. Okay, I read that pretty quick like usual, so I hope everybody got that. Are there any, before I move to Betsy, are there any questions for Todd and Tom? Councilor Caterina?
I just wanted to thank, this isn't a question, but I was happy to see that the school department is going to step up with the food part, because that was a concern to me when Mr. Souza mentioned in one of our meetings that there was no food available at the site and kids would have to bring their own lunch. So I'm very happy to see that there is a way to make sure these kids get fed, particularly the ones who are on the paid school lunch program. So thank you for pursuing that, Mr. Souza.
Thank you. Any other questions for Todd or Tom? Okay, so now I'll transition into counselor comments. Betsy, would you like to share your screen? That worked. That was a lot better. That was a better setup.
Yeah. So this will also probably lead to some questions for Todd, but I thought it was easier to do it this way. So, if I let me share something different. So just really quickly, these are the standard operating procedures for COVID cases put out by the Maine CDC and adopted by Scarborough and schools in general. It's quite a lengthy document, but it's quite thorough as well. So it answers a whole lot of questions. And I think, there's also some other guidelines that are worth considering that I have some questions for Todd about. So let me pop back to this other document that just pulls some pieces out of that, but I wanted to show you where this came from. Todd, like one of the recommendations is, that children stay with other children that they're normally with. And so the cohorts won't be mixing in different areas. So are you going to keep the cohorts straight in terms of how they're grouped in schools and in classrooms, or kids that, because of the age, serving the different ages, are we going to have kids mixing that are not mixing at the school?
Initially, our plan now is to, not initially, our plan now is to, once we see what our final registration, at a minimum, try to group these cohorts out by school, because they're traveling and using the same facilities within that school. I mean, ultimately, there's going to be opportunity that that kids are going to end up, being with each other at some point during the day, just like they would at childcare, just like they would if they were at our summer camp facilities. But our goal is to try to keep them in their pods and their cohorts throughout the day, move them around. And that's why we started with a number of 40 to figure out how do we safely move these around, groups around the facility once we get set up and get it finally designed, to make sure that we can get children in and out of space, have time to clean up after them, have time to disinfect, and actually make a meaningful day for them while they're there for us, potentially some of these kids for 11 hours a day.
Okay, great. And if you have more applications than you have spots, can you explain again how you're going to determine who gets the spots?
Sure. So we're going to be going in really a 3-phase process, maybe 4. The way we did this initially was working off a budget, initial registrations back in the spring. And we're going to take the presently registered kids in our aftercare program and commit spots to them first, and they're part of this survey results, as well as the next phase would be then to go and backfill from the folks that were in part of the initial fall registration, but chose to pull out for one reason or another, whether it's because of care, timing of things. And then at that point, if we have space available, we'll then open it up to the general public, but we'll have a discussion with Tom and anyone else that needs to be part of it, just to kind of figure out where philosophically we want to be. Are we going to be supporting general population? Are we going to be supporting on a needs base? Are we going to be looking at essential workers, which potentially could mean residents with children from out of town? And so that would be that last and final piece through this process. And if within this initial 210 people from the initial registration, we would set up a lottery. If let's say we have 20 spaces left and 30 people, our software can create a lottery system that selects out of that group. So we get out of hand picking folks.
And out of the initial group that are already in the program, you don't expect to need a lottery for that?
No, not based on the numbers from we're using based on the numbers from our survey. When you see out of the total 210 people, came back Monday, Tuesday cohort was 39, and Thursday, Friday was 43. And
Okay,
so at a maximum there, we'd have to do choose 3 people, or we may decide to do a larger cohort depending on when we see what our design space is.
Okay, great. And so I guess finally, this standard operating procedure where a close contact is defined as someone with exposure to the confirmed case within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more, regardless of masking. And then there's some other things that go here, but they put it in a nice chart that if there's a positive, you have to quarantine even if you test negative. So that would be the whole classroom. You can see here what the different levels are. And when we get down to only 3 outbreaks now, whether or not we agree or everyone agrees with all these guidelines, and it is what it is. So it's the hand that we've been dealt. But just 3 outbreaks across a couple of different areas would shut down the entire school. So will you be going by this, or do you have guidelines from like daycare facilities that are going to apply more to you, or how does that work?
Because we're partnering with the school presently in a before and after care, our plan right now is to model this so parents are on the same page with how they're going to be treated. Part of the packet note was parent communication form, so they understand kind of what our policy is, what they're signing off on, and then also is that last sheet that kind of tells them, and it kind of models this in a different way. 1 or more high-risk symptoms, low-risk symptoms, two in that category, puts them into that. So they're getting this right now pretty consistently through the school, and we're going to try to keep that message the same across the board, so we don't have 2 different guidelines, especially where they're coming from before and after care on the 2 days they're in school, and then coming back to us on those other potentially 2 or 3 days.
So how are you going to define a classroom? But if you have 1 or 2 cases in a classroom, then everyone has to quarantine for 14 days.
Yep, good question. We're going to define those just like we discussed a few minutes earlier. We'll have cohorts set up that they'll have a lead counselor with them, whether that's full-time or part-time staff, and they'll be set up in those groupings.
And then you'll have to leave space. So you could lose space for 7 days because the guideline says it has to be dormant for 7 days.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And when we're talking about 13,000 square feet here, and that's why we were very cautious with the amount of
the numbers. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Looking at 4 on those days, and again the having that space.
So if someone is a close contact in the school vernacular, so the school ends up having someone that's considered a close contact, they're going to pass that name on to you, and then so by transference they become the 1 or 2 within your program. Is that correct?
That's a great question. I don't think we've had that discussion. I'd have to read a little thorough before I say yes or no. I'd have to relook at that.
And if 14 students or more have to quarantine, will we be refunding them for those 14 days?
Part of this plan, depending on where the funding comes from them, we would refund people. We are only charging for a month at a time. We're not doing like we do before and after care where they can pay for longer periods of time. So that's why we're only committing 30 days at a time to the program.
Well, right. So if we were to have to shut the whole program down, I would certainly think that we would refund, but are we thinking that we'll refund if say my student has to quarantine and leave the program temporarily?
I'd have to go back. I don't have the document in front of me to see what our staff created. As far as I think there's a window in there. If it's a certain amount of time, then no. And if it's greater, then yes. We would
Okay.
refund.
Okay. All right. So I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thanks,
Sure.
Betsy. Counselor Hayes, as soon as her screen comes back. Okay. Peter, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's where, and I apologize, it's where I started before. I think a question I had a while ago is, as I understood it, I thought these types of things, especially as we were just talking about, if there is an outbreak, and if there are some fatalities or some extended illnesses, who has a liability? I understand if it happens under sort of the school, sort of jurisdiction, there are some significant protections from the liability. The question that I asked is if we do it under the town auspices, we got a partial answer saying from a liability protection, our liability coverage that the town has would allow some protection, but that was unclear. So my question just becomes, if we do have an unfortunate situation where we have an outbreak and there's some really bad outcomes, is there greater protection doing this under the school auspices or the town auspices? And that was unclear to me. It was, the answer was legally that we're not sure, there's no case law to protect it. But my specific question is there greater protection written into the law currently under school jurisdiction versus municipal jurisdiction?
I'll hazard a response here. Councilor Hayes, I don't believe I have a definitive answer to that specific question. What I can say is that we work with our legal team and come up with, based on their guidance, a set of policies, procedures, liability waivers, and the parent communication note, all of which intend to reduce any potential liability. I think we'd be naive to say that there's no liability here. But again, I believe the general theory of negligence is really what comes to play here. And I think that would be true of schools, frankly. My understanding is so long as you are acting in good faith and following all of the proper procedures, you're insulating yourself. You're not immune per se. Anyone can sue you for anything, whether they would be victorious, I guess is the question. And we do intend to model all of our activities as best we can after certainly CDC and DOE guidelines to the extent possible.
Yes, but again, my frustration is that was the question I asked originally. We got the attorney's response you just referenced.
Mm-hmm.
Still left unanswered whether there is greater protection, and I understand there is greater protection if this was under, the school has greater protections if these things happen within the school realm versus a municipal realm. I understand that we have liability waivers and other things,
Mm-hmm.
but as I read that document, there is some protection for that. But my question becomes a critical decision point for me if it's better under the school auspices, because they're going to be dealing with this with kids in the classroom.
Sure.
It's the same issue for their teacher and all the personnel. We're going to have personnel on the front lines that are under the municipal jurisdiction. What happens? And so
it sounds as though you know more.
Excuse me, there's a question I've asked twice and it has not been addressed and or answered. And I'm asking it again tonight. And what I'm hearing is that question wasn't answered from a legal perspective if there's difference in liability protection between the two entities.
I beg your pardon. I don't know the answer. You sound as though you know that there is a distinction there.
I don't know. That was a question I've asked twice now. It was in the original workshop. It was in the second workshop. And I thought there'd be an answer tonight. And there isn't an answer. So that's a critical piece for me. I don't know, but it's something we should know.
I would certainly say I would prefer not even having this conversation with you. I would have hoped that the school, not have hoped, but I would have preferred the school take this task on in the first place. The reality is they're not capable of doing that, given all sorts of reasons. And so that's really the proposition in front of us. I hear your question. I'm not sure if it's in this context, that's not an option that's in front of us. And the question is whether the town wants to move forward in this direction and do everything we can to minimize that liability. But certainly there is some there. I wouldn't say otherwise.
Councilor Hamlin?
Yeah, I understand the question. I know there's been a lot of discussion about it. I actually read the legal opinion and read the releases that we use, that we ask people to sign who are, having their children go there voluntarily. They're not being forced to do this. So, I mean, if our standard is going to be suddenly, all of a sudden, we need 100% certainty of everything, we're in the wrong game here. Okay. Politics is called the art of the possible. And I think the way that, we're approaching some of these issues is we're trying to find a way, not to do things. We're trying to do something here that's a noble effort with compressed time frame with a lot of uncertainties. And that's the situation that most parents are in, having their kids go back to school. So these are individual decisions that people need to make, and it's a decision we need to make as a council. And I think we've worked very quickly to try to make this thing happen. We've gotten a letter from the schools that indicates their support for this. We've got incremental funding. And this is something, where we're trying to meet a need in some fashion, recognizing it's far from perfect. So I think the tone here a little bit is, I think, we're working through issues that seem to be, individual questions that, don't represent the overall wishes of the council. So I just think everyone's entitled to their opinion, but that's mine.
Councilor Calucci?
Yeah, very well said, Councilor Hamel. There's uncertainty all around this whole topic, and some people are going to be able to, go hide for 6 months or whatever until this thing goes away. A lot of folks can't, and I think it's part of our responsibility to try to help find or help them through it in a responsible way. That doesn't mean that we have all the answers and that it's going to be 100%, that there's no risk. It means that we're going to do our due diligence and do our best to try to solve an imperfect or create an imperfect solution to a really horrible situation. And, I wish that we could offer it to everybody. I wish everybody could go back to school. That's not on the table right now. We're going to try to start small. I think the way that this is being approached is responsible and reasonable. And I hope that it works. And I hope that we learn from it how we can get kids back to school, or in some kind of different format, some mix that will allow working families to continue working and putting food on the table and providing a safe space for kids that need it to keep up with their peers and learn. So I appreciate all the work and effort that's gone into this. I appreciated the letter from the Board of Education and support. I thought that was very well written and thoughtful. And they've got the reason they can't handle this right now is not because they're challenged in any way. This is a tough nut to crack, and they're taking one step at a time. And I think that's the prudent approach. We have some capacity on the municipal side to try to help, and I think we should do it. So I'm in support of it. I appreciate, Todd and Tom and all the work that's gone into doing this.
Councilor Gleisting?
Yeah, so, to Councilor Hayes's point, I still wonder if this were just being subcontracted through the schools to community services, if that would provide some level of that liability protection that's been mentioned, that the school is actually saying, okay, this is our program, but we're subcontracting it to community services. These are the people that we're hiring to do it, and it's basically all done. So I'm not sure that Councilor Hayes' concern couldn't be met with kind of a creative solution. But for me, this, I think there's a lot of emotion at this, and this is where I first started out. And that's why I originally said we should definitely look into this, because I know the need is great. And so I believe, Council Hamill just called it a noble effort, and folks are saying it's imperfect. I think where I've come down is the one aspect we didn't look at a ton is those CDC guidelines for what is going to close a program down. And unfortunately, when you look at places that are going back to school, they are being largely successful, but they are having to close classrooms down. So, entire schools have not, for the most part, had to close down, but they've been able to keep kids isolated enough that a classroom here has had to stay home for 14 days or something like that. I'm hoping that that's the most that happens to us. But by our getting into this area, as good as the intention is, we have the opportunity that we may, as the town, accidentally close a classroom down. So if we have some kids mixed and there's a positive case through close contact, whether it comes from the school side, and we have a kid from another class that's in with that kid, then that classroom may have to be closed down. So it is unfortunately a very bad situation. The guidelines are what they are, regardless of whether people's opinions are that the risk is not that high or it is that high. I think there's a good chance that by mixing all of this together, we're going to kind of exacerbate the problem, as well as we may have to close down big portions of the program. So I really support all the work and the effort, and I certainly support the emotion around it. I can't support it for that reason, but I wish it incredibly well. And if it does pass, and I hope that that does not happen, and I hope that that concern, just goes away and it all works out great for folks. And more than that, I just hope we're back to 5-day school pretty soon, and we're stuck with some rented space, because while that wouldn't be good, quote unquote, financially, it would certainly be great for kids and great for the town. So that's where I'm at. I do still think Councilor Hayes's concerns could be addressed. So thank you.
Councilor Caterina?
Sorry, I had to unmute. I hear everything folks are saying. I think that both Councilor Hamill and Councilor Cloutier were eloquent in expressing exactly where I am with this. I read the legal opinion also, and the only thing I want to remind people of is we are a governmental entity, and there is something called sovereign immunity that will come into play to some impact, to some effect with this. But I'm not an attorney, but that was certainly one of the things that the attorneys have brought up. So, I'm definitely in support of this, and I thank folks for all the work on it. Life is not without risks. Life itself is a risk. So do we hide or do we move forward and offer help to people? I think that the role of us as government officials is to offer some solutions for folks in this situation.
Hey, Todd, I have a quick question. Is it, I know this is a big ask, so I apologize, but is there a way to throw something on the website to get a sponsor a kid program up there? So maybe we can reserve X amount of spots for donations. For instance, if I wanted to sponsor a kid for a week, or is there something, since we don't have, we have 3 weeks before you guys are live. I guess I'm asking you just to consider possibly setting aside X spots for kids in need, and maybe throwing together a quick campaign. Because I think this might be an easy lift amongst the community to pay for, even as few as 5 or 6 kids. I feel like we could get creative of helping a few kids out. That's all. So I just want to ask you publicly
Yeah, I mean, like I said all right along, I'm willing to consider anything philosophically that council or leadership on the town side wants to consider. Again, my stance has always been, we've been communicating with these families, trying to meet that need. And go from there. And so I'd still like to honor that, obviously, first.
Yep.
And then if we get to the point that we have those spaces available, then if that's the wishes of, okay, we've got 6 spots on this cohort and 9 on that spots, and we want to put them into that type of program where we're looking for support, and designating those spots, then I'm absolutely okay with that.
Okay, so I would just like, so I'm asking you that. Once you take care of the people in the pipeline, if there's a few, I think there'd be plenty of appetite to help a kid and a family out here. So,
Absolutely.
Counselor Hayes?
Yeah, I think, following the conversation, I think, much like Councilor Gleisteen, I don't think I'll be supporting this tonight. My real concern is we can still, not knowing answers to liability questions, if there's a way we can minimize liability and still achieve our outcome, I think it's frankly irresponsible of us just to say it's the right thing to do and we should ignore that. We should have the answer to that. We don't. We're taking significant risk. You heard the town manager say there is liability. We don't know what that liability is, and we all have financial responsibility to limit the liability to the town. So without knowing the answers to the question, we can't do that. My second problem becomes we're actually talking about selecting 40 kids out of our whole community that are going to benefit this program. The program, is about $3,500 per student. That is a significant subsidy to 40 kids, or maybe 80, or whatever the numbers turn out to be. There are a ton of other families in the community that are also in need. I mean, when they signed up for this program, that was pre the decision of what the schools were going to do. So I think, we're benefiting a select few, and there's many out there. I've talked to a lot of parents that are in, real concerns about what they're going to do. So that concerns me. And then from the school perspective, I do appreciate their letter of support, but we're talking about maybe some furniture, or maybe they'll help financially at the end. But frankly, they're in much better financial position than us to take the risk. They have a $1.5 million surplus from last year's budget. They have $2.1 million they have gotten in COVID aid, which we haven't heard about how they're going to use it. We set aside $500,000 plus for COVID. So they have $4.1 million that they have available to try to solve the issues they're facing for our students this year. I think there's a way we can do this. It's one town, one budget. I think there's a way we can accomplish what we're talking about doing here and minimize liability. I think we're irresponsible if we don't. We haven't answered those questions. We're just moving ahead. And, some counselors have said, they're big picture. They're not into numbers. We're running a business. We need to understand the numbers. If there's a way to limit liability, if we have a bad outcome, and yeah, I read that same legal opinion, and it's unfortunate the attorney's not here. But the attorney did not say we're going to be immune from liability. She said, basically, it's an open-ended question. There hasn't been challenged. We should minimize our liability. We can achieve everything that's on the table here with a slightly different structure, and we're not willing to consider it. So I think there's a better way to achieve what we're trying to achieve. We didn't talk about it, so I will not be supporting that. I don't think it's the right thing to do from a financial liability and financial stewardship point of view.
Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, I sit back and I listen to this. I tell you, a little upset. I don't like to be called irresponsible. I'm a responsible person. I think this council has been responsible. I think we're putting in place every measure possible to mitigate liability. And life is full of risks. This is not a school problem. This is to help parents go back to work, and they happen to be students. So, town council is supposed to be the leadership of the town. And once in a while, you bite the bullet and you go forward with what's the best interest of the community, and you mitigate the risk to the rest of the town. And I feel that we really have through the waivers and the legal opinions. So I fully support it. I hope it the best. I think it's going to be run by a great community services program, and I definitely support it.
Tony, call the vote, please.
Councilor Clucci?
Yes.
Councilor Hayes?
No.
Councilor Gleisteen?
Nope.
Councilor Katarina?
Yes, absolutely.
Councilor Johnson?
Yes.
Councilor Hamel?
Yes.
Chairman Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-2. Thank you.
Thank you. The final item is adjournment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Tony?
Counselor Clucci,
Yes.
Counselor Hayes,
Yes.
Counselor Gleisting,
Yes.
Counselor Katarina,
Yes.
Counselor Johnson,
Yes.
Counselor Hamel,
Yes,
and Chairman Johnson.
Yes. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a
Thank
good night.
you.
Thank you.
thanks very much.